Selection. In this video, we will begin learning about selective programming. Selective programming is where a program selects one out of two or more courses of action, depending on whether or not a certain condition is true or false. Selective programming always starts out with writing the if keyword in all caps. Then, inside a pair of parentheses, we write a condition or Boolean expression. After that, a pair of curly brackets, and then inside those brackets will be a block of statements. These are a block of conditional statements that will execute if and only if the condition is true. If the condition is false, then these block of statements will get skipped over. For example, consider the following segment of code. We start by declaring a variable named x and setting it equal to 1. Then, in the next line, we say if x is less than or equal to 5. If this condition is true, then we're going to execute the conditional statement belonging to that if statement. If it's not true, then we're going to skip over it. Since 1 is indeed less than 5, we're going to go inside the if statement and execute the conditional statement. After that's done, we move on to the next statement that's after the if statement. Now consider this segment of code. Here we start by initializing x to 5. Then in the next line, we state if x is less than 1. If this is true, then once again, we're going to execute the conditional statement associated with this if. If it's not, we're going to skip over it. Since this is false, 5 is not less than 1, we're going to skip over the conditional statement and go on to the next one. Notice that regardless of whether the condition was true or false, we always executed display world. That's because this statement was not one of the conditional statements dependent on the condition. It was just a normal sequential instruction, meaning it's going to execute in sequence regardless of whether or not the condition is true. Two-way selection. Two-way selective programming is when a program chooses between two blocks of instructions where one executes if and only if the condition is true and the other executes if and only if the condition is false. In two-way selection, we once again start with a regular if statement, the if keyword, the condition, then inside the curly brackets, a block of statements. After that, we have the else keyword, then another pair of curly brackets, and a second block of statements. The first block of statements executes if and only if the condition is true. The second block of statements executes if and only if the condition is false. To see an example of this, consider the following segment. In the first line, we declare a variable named x and assign it the value 5. Then in the next line, we say if x is greater than 3, display greater. Since this condition is true, we're going to go inside that if statement, display greater, then we're going to skip over the else block because once again, the else block only gets executed if the condition is false. After we display greater, we come down to the last line and display end. We execute this last line because once again, this last line is not belonging to either the if or the else block. It's independent. It's just a normal sequential instruction. Now consider this program segment. Here we declare a variable named x, set it equal to 1. Then in the next line, we state if x is greater than 3, display greater. However, in this case, the condition is false. 1 is not greater than 3. So for that reason, we skip over that first conditional block, then go to the else block. And once you go to the else block, you're always going to execute what's inside of it. So in this case, we execute the second block of statements, we display lesser, then we go on to the next line, display end. Once again, the last line, display end, got executed regardless of whether or not the condition was true or false because it did not belong to either the if block or the else block. It was not a conditional statement, it was a sequential statement.